Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick Taking Table. I'm Taylor, and here we are at the Badlands. Ooh la la. Wonderful national park that we are exploring, and the games we are covering today are Depot by on the screen, and also ladder climbing tactics, I believe, also on the screen. The hooks to these are actually a little similar. So they're both ladder climbing shedding games where the goal is to get rid of cards, but the hook to kind of both of them is you are going to be taking cards from kind of an offer in a way. In Depot, what cards are in the offer are what melds you can play. So if in the offer there's 2 ones, then you can play pairs or a single. But if there's like a 1 and a 2, you can play a run of 2. Pretty interesting stuff. And then ladder climbing tactics, the hook on that one is a lot of unique melds, a lot of kind of like scout and play, if you can think about it that way. A lot of ways to draft cards to then try to play them and get out, kind of shed out in the game. Those are the hooks. So let's go to the table and I'm gonna go enjoy these wonderful, wonderful Badlands. All right, see you there. The deck in Depot is numbered 1 through 8, and there's more 1 cards than there are 8 cards. So there's 13 1 cards, there's 12 2 cards, and they get 1 less all the way up to 8 cards where there's 7 of those. Here we have a game of Depot set up for 3 players. So no matter the player count, you're gonna shuffle the deck and deal player cards. At 3 and 4 players, it's 9 cards. At 5, it would be 8. And then you're gonna put the rest here. You're gonna have a space set up for the discard, but you're also gonna have a space called the storage. And this is gonna have a certain number of face-up cards depending on the player count. So at 3 and 4 players, at 3 players, it's 3 cards, and at 4 and 5, it would be 4 cards. Depot is a climbing shedding game, so the goal of the game is a player to get rid of their cards. So once a player gets rid of their cards, you're going to see who has the most cards left. They're going to get actually a penalty card from the center storage here, but I'll explain that for scoring. But the goal is to get rid of your cards. But as for the climbing shedding, what can players play? Well, the melds that they can play is dependent on what is in this storage. So you're going to look here, and you're going to see if there's sets, runs, or what else they can play. Well, they can always play a single. So looking right here, this is a great example because players can always play single because, there's single cards here. But as you can see here, there's 2 ones, which means players can currently play pairs. So what players can play here are pairs and singles. So I hope that makes sense in that example. We'll get some more examples here. Let's say this little scrap of paper has the first lead. So looking at their hand here, they could, if they wanted to, play these 2 6s because as you can see, there's pairs, but maybe they want to get rid of a low card, so they're just going to play a single 3. The climbing shedding in this game is similar to games like Scout, where you can play a higher card of that number, kind of combination, or you can play a higher number of cards. So going back to here, this player over here, they couldn't play a single 3, but maybe they play a pair of 3s because 2 cards is bigger than 1 card. They beat that, and you can kind of just start discarding the cards as you go. If you don't want to play or you can't play, so let's come to the barcode here, they can't play the 2 3s because, again, it's climbing shedding, and that wouldn't be a bigger number of cards. They could play the 2 6s if they wanted to, but let's say they didn't want to. When you pass in this game, you're going to take cards from the center. You must take 1. So they could take a 4 into their hand, and then if they want to, they don't have to, they could add a card back. If they don't add a card back, a new one will just be flipped and added to the center as such, but maybe they do want to put 1 back. If you do put 1 back, it can't be of the same rank. So they took a 4, they can't put a different 4 or any other 4s from their hand back into the center. Let's say they played a 1, spicy. So now, as you can see, players can now play a single, a pair, or a 3 of a kind. So coming back to this player here, they have a higher pair. That's what they're going to do. They're just going to play those 2 6s. What's interesting is the ones could have left and then they could have not played pairs, but they were still able to. Come to this player over here. They have, sadly, not any way to play, so they are forced to pass. When you pass, you're going to take all of 1 value. So they took the 3 ones, and then they do want to add at least something back, so they're going to add the 2. So if there's not enough, as you can see, there's 2 more spots that need to be there. You're going to just refill it all the way up to the number. So again, players can play pairs now and a single, so they can't play triples anymore. Let's have a bit of a spicier example come out. There's a little teaser. Here we go. So instead of that 7, let's say a 1 came out. So now, as you can see, players can still play singles. They can still play pairs. But as you can see here, there's now a run of 2. So now players can play a run of 2. So coming to this player, oh, that player passed rather sadly. Coming to this player, looking at their hand, they can now play pairs or a run of 2. So sadly, they don't have a good pair, but now that they can play a run of 2, they can play this 7-6. When you're playing the same number of cards right here, you're actually just going to add up the values. So this is 12 right here, and this is 13. So you can only play that if you're beating the sum. So sometimes in climbing shitting games, it's a little bizarre when you can play runs over pairs or sets or whatever that is, and usually they take like the lowest number, but in this game, in a cool way, what they do is they just add it up. So 13 is bigger than 12, so this was able to play that. So coming to this player now, they're in a similar situation. They could play these 2 8s because those beat the 7-6 because it's 16 to 13, or if they wanted to, they could play 8-7 because that's just, you know, a stronger 2 run. So flow like this is going to continue if, for here we'll do it right now as a good example. Let's say this player passed and they took the 1 and they didn't want to add a card, a new one will be added. And then let's say this player passed, took the 7, didn't want to add a card, and then a new one got added. If players pass and it goes back around to the player who had played, so kind of everyone passes in a row. It's also soft pass, by the way, as you could see, players are coming back. But if it comes all the way back around, this player is going to clear what they had, which they did, and they're going to lead to the next trick. But first, you're actually going to add a card. So now the total of cards in the row is 1 more. And as you can see now, players can play 4 of a kind, which is awesome. And if they pass, they would take this 4 of a kind. So flow like that is going to continue. So like this player, you know, they could play pair 5s and they're getting kind of close. They're down to 2 cards. That is going to keep going around and around and around. Let's say this player did shed out. So maybe this is what it looked like at the start of a play, and they played the 8. In the rules, you could just play a one-handed game where this player has won the whole game, but it does say if you want to play a longer game, you can play more. And in that optional rule, you're going to play 3 rounds, and whoever has the fewest points wins. But what happens is when the current game ends, meaning this player goes out, you're going to see players' hand size. So coming to the barcode player, they had 3, 6, 8, but coming up here to the tape player, they had 3, 6, 9, 10. So whoever did the worst is going to take, okay, this isn't the best example, but let's say it looked like this. Whoever did the worst is going to take the highest number here. So it actually goes out of the deck in a funny way, but the tape player up here got 4 points. You don't want points. And then the next worst player is going to take the next highest. So they're going to take 2. You're going to combine all the hands and the discard pile and this. You're going to set it up just like normal. And again, you're going to play 3 rounds. Right now, this cardboard is 0, the tape up here is 4, and then the barcode is 2. You're going to, again, play 3 total rounds. Whoever has the fewest points wins, and that's how to play the long version of Depot. The deck in Takeover Ladder Climbing Tactics is 5 suits numbered 1 through 13. Depending on the player count, you will remove some cards, and also there is a wild, where it's any suit, any number 0 to 14. Here we have Takeover set up for 3 players, and before I go into this very brief overview, because this won't be a full rules teach, because the final games folks, the people who made this game, have a very in-depth, wonderful how to play video that I'll link in the description. Go check that out. This is just going to be a super high level overview. But essentially, here we have the game set up for 3 players. So each player is going to get a wild. They're going to get dealt some cards. Each player will have a player reference. And also, you're going to set up, you have right here, this is called the Undercity. You have the city, then you have the advantage and a deck. And in the deck is going to be shuffled both some normal cards, but also some defect cards, which we will get into. This is a ladder climbing shedding game, meaning you want to get rid of your cards. That's the whole goal of the game. And the ladder climbing part is because we will be playing melds, and here we have right here the melds that you can play. They call them formation types. But what you can play is a single card, any single card, pack, which is kind of like sets but not pairs and not anything over 7 or more, which makes sense because there's only 5 suits and a wild in the game. Then there's runs, but specifically runs of length 4, and then there's suited runs, but specifically only 4 and 5, or 4 or 5 rather, suited runs. And then there's bombs, but the bombs are also very specific in that they must be a 2, 3, 4 of the gray and all of another suit, or 10, 11, 12 of the gray and another suit, and those are bombs. So what can players do on their turn? Well, we can go to the green lifesaver to check it out. You can vie, which is just playing to the trick. You can plan, which is kind of like Scout and playing if you have played the game Scout, and then deploy, which is using one of these special powers. The special powers are on the 1s, 7s, and 13s, and they're things like take the advantage, or this one is discard one card from your hand to the top column of the Undercity, so kind of getting rid of a card, things like that. But let's start super simple. So again, green lightsaber's turn. They could, if they wanted to, just start off with a 10. And you're going to be playing up into the city. And as you can see, the city holds kind of 5 or so slots. And that makes sense because when you play, so let's say that to do that, because to be able to vie or to play, you will have to beat it. That's the climbing part of the game. You will flip over that card. And so cards will kind of stay up here unless, of course, there's like powers that change it. Like sometimes there's powers. Let's see if I have one here. But essentially, you can use a power to clear this and then change the formation. So that was one of the 3 actions, which is playing on your turn. Then you can just deploy, which is playing a power. This one, like we saw here, is able to discard one hand to the top of the city. So when you deploy or use an action, you're going to discard that card and then do that action. So maybe this player does that. They just discard one of their cards. That is their turn. The last thing that you can do is called plan, which is kind of like Scout and Play. As you can see here, it says add 1 to 3 cards, one at a time, from the deck to the top of the Undercity column. Then choose A or B. A is use one of the cards from 1 to 4 of the columns in order to play, or B is just swap any cards from your hand within a column. So let's say this player over here decided to plan. They are going to flip this one, maybe put it here, and then they want to do the A, which is taking 1 to 4 cards from the columns and then use it to vie. So they're going to take this 13 and play it up here, which would flip that. So players are going to keep going around. They are going to either use powers, play, or just kind of Scout and Play, taking from here and using it to play, or maybe just even swapping. Like they could, put in this 11, take this 12. Maybe that'll help out with their hand. But players are going to keep doing that until someone is out of cards. It is just a one-hand game, so the player who does get rid of the cards does win the whole game. And that's essentially a bit of an overview on Takeover. Again, go check out the Final Games How to Play for more in-depth. So that was Depot and Takeover, and here we are back from our tour. This isn't the end. This is just, we finished the tour. So all the intros are still going to be national parks, but you know that we've made it. So spoiler alert, jumping around Tarantino style, I have survived the national parks, and here we are back with Melvin, the star of the show, to talk about Depot and Takeover. Let's talk about Takeover first. This was a Game Market West release, and I love the art style. I think the whole aesthetic is great, and I think it leans into what they want from the gameplay and the theme. There's a lot of thematic explanations. So instead of playing, you're vying and things like that. Personally, I get hung up on those, and I think players I play with, my group, kind of also does as well. But it's kind of a indication of what the game is. It's very particular. So that jargon is actually helpful to know, oh, this is that type of game. Because the melds are particular, the play is particular, the actions are very specific, the bombs are specific. So, for example, like there's no pairs, but there's 3 to 6. Or the runs are very specific. The bombs even have a specific suit you need. So, it's a very particular game. The powers themselves also very specific. How many times you can play into the city, very specific. There's just a lot of things to pay attention to, a lot of details. Like I was playing with someone and they try to play a pair, and you're like, well, can't play a pair. And so I think you already know if this game is maybe for you, just because it is trying to do something that gives players flexibility, but has them try to hit very specific targets, if that makes sense. So yes, you can draft from like a lot of different cards if you want to play, or if you want to exchange your cards, but the melds you're trying to get are a little bit more restricted and more specific than a classic climbing shading game. To me, that specificity and particularness was just kind of like a rub, kind of like a rough area that I think it was indicative when we were playing and I was teaching and someone was just like, this is a little too much for me. I'll come back on the next one. And we played it, and then when we came back to like a more traditional climbing shading game, that person did jump in and then they kept playing again. So I think it's one of those games that I think it's doing something interesting, but I think just has a little bit too many specific rules to be something that I'd want to pull out to remember every single time, or like catch players or make sure people are playing the right way. It just felt like a lot of surprising players, especially with the powers. That's kind of what powers are. I think some interesting ideas where it's like there's always this offer, there's always like a scout and play, you can move around, you can bounce around, but there's a few rough edges that were kind of hiccups in the gameplay. But overall, cool ideas, which was fun, and that is Takeover. And for Depot is fascinating because I think theoretically, philosophically, the idea itself is fascinating. I absolutely love it. It's cool to have I almost said player defined, but it really isn't. Sometimes player defined melds in the front, or like what players can play in the storage. And it's cool to have it change and have that be very tactical. And have singles being always a thing, pairs and runs of 2 being more likely than 3 of a kind and runs of 1, 2, and 3, or obviously up to 4 and 5 length sets and runs. That's a cool concept, but I found in play it makes it to building to something is really tough. So why building to something works great in Scout or Odin or like games like that is that it's always true that if you work towards something big or good or strong, you can play it. In this game, you can't build toward a big set. You can't build toward a long run because it might not be playable. So then you go, okay, well, what can I build toward? Well, you can definitely take cards that are higher. So like 8s and 7s are great because they're bigger than 1s and 2s. But it's tough because, like I said, do you only take some 8s and 7s? Do you try to take runs of 2s and only pairs and such to be able to play? But then randomly, because a lot of times players will take a fair amount of cards before it gets back to you, and like the melds will change randomly by the time it gets back to you, especially in a higher player count game, that you don't know if those runs of 2s and those pairs will even be able to play. And so then you're the one who has to take some stuff. And then you have like a lot of just junk because you're taking just random numbers and things. So I think the game is really fascinating conceptually. In practice, though, it leads to not having a good direction for building your hand sometimes. And also just that randomness of if someone takes a bunch of a set, a bunch of random stuff comes out. And so like anything can happen. And by the time it gets back to you, anything can really happen. So I think at 3-player it was best just because you have more say and it doesn't change as much and it comes back to you. That's like the classic thing. I think people talk about that with like 5 tribes or something. Like a lot of the time it's hard to plan your turn because by the time it gets back to you, the state could be in very different situations. So that's what it kind of felt like in this game. I'd hope it'd be back to me. I'd try to influence it, but usually the storage, which is what, I could play, was different. Or on the table, there was already like a different meld or whatever, so whatever I was building toward probably couldn't play anyway. So it felt like a weird circle the drain, but I wasn't sure if I was even going toward the drain when I was circling it. It felt like I was bouncing around a lot. So really interesting concept. I love the idea. I get how you are probably supposed to win. You're probably supposed to like build some things, try to influence it to be sets or whatever it is, or runs, or try to just build and grow stronger and then try to like go out. But it felt like the same strategy that everyone was doing was just very random how they would do well, if that made sense. All that to say, really cool concept, but in practice, just really tough to wrangle. And it felt a little aimless at times, a little tough at times, but I love the idea behind it. And I think there is like a cool, interesting game there. Maybe just needs a little bit of development. So that was Depot and Takeover. I didn't love them, but maybe you will like them for maybe even the various reasons that I did not like them. I love that part about the channel. So many people will reach out and be like, hey, I like it because of X, Y, and Z. It's my favorite thing. And also this channel was more just talking about ideas, a lot of hair there, ideas around trick-taking climbing and what they can do. And it's so interesting. I think both these games have that in spades, hearts and clubs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.